Yurick and Scott Wilke, three members of the team behind Dead End Moon. So welcome to the show, all three of you.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, now I am super excited because obviously Mike's been on before. Alice and Scott, you haven't been on, so welcome to the show. And I think the best place to start with this is before we even get into Dead End Moon, and Mike, I want you to be as professional as possible when I ask you this, is how did the three of you meet?
Back alley somewhere.
Well, it really was a back alley. I mean, like, do you want the real story, or do you want like a tailored one that sounds good?
Like a sugar.
Like Alice and I met through a dating app. Scott and I met through a dating app, and then I was just kind of the link. So
Yeah.
I think well, we've just known each other for years.
Yeah, through different friends that we've been around and things like that, and then
She dated one of
dating
my
app was just kind
best
of
friends and
how this happened, but we've
swooped
known
in and
each
took
other
her.
for a while.
Yeah.
You gotta date people that are friends of your
Yeah,
ex.
she's been pre-qualified. She dated one of my
Yeah.
friends, so I kind of
Kind of
already
a
knew.
vetting process.
Yeah.
And then Scott, how did you come into this? Because obviously for those who don't know, Mike and Alice are a couple. They're either married or they're going to get married. And that's why I asked the question. I said to be professional, Mike, for a very good reason. Because you all know we don't want the underground skit right now. We still are a PG-13 show. Fuck, now we became rated R.
You only get one of those per show. I get it.
So yeah, Mike and I are also a couple, and but no, we met. Was it 2014? Was that when you did Dragonfly?
Yeah. Like we both were kind of getting in at the same time.
Yeah, he was doing his Kickstarter first, and I backed it, and then we just started talking. And I owe a lot to Mike, honestly, because my Kickstarter failed miserably, and I was about to just stop because I'm like, okay, this thing bombed like no other. So just let's throw in the towel. But so talking to Mike, he actually encouraged me to keep going with it. So just kind of like rebranded the whole thing, redid the whole thing. The following year, I did a new Kickstarter, and Everett Forge is now on issue 3. So that's how it goes.
We kind of over time just kept in touch too, just talking and stuff. And we worked on a book together finally in 2019. It's called Undercity Tales, and that was like first time that I had an idea about something and knew that I probably wasn't the right person to write it. And so I reached out to Scott because Scott's like the writer. Like I know a lot of writers. I think Scott's the writer that I really had in mind for that book. And he did a great job. I mean, it was so funny because like, you know, for me, it's such a long process to write a script. Like I just kind of sit down and write 5 pages. I'll really think about that for a few days. I'll really sit there and just plan out the dialogue and just go over these different scenarios. And Scott can just whip out a script overnight. Like, you know, so we were talking about the idea of Undercity Tales and like just, I don't know, a few days later, he's like, all right, got it done. I was like, geez. After that, I was like, man, I always want to work with this guy. This guy's got it figured out. Scott's a really, really great storyteller. And so it's kind of great that we're kind of working on another book together. And obviously that Alice is involved with finally too. So, yeah.
So to even talk about that, because obviously you worked on Tales of Undercity, I think it is called. And then
but you're close enough, man. It's all right. It's all right.
9 o'clock at night. I'm exhausted. So obviously that book happens, and then how does Dead End Moon spin out of that? Because obviously where did that idea come from? And obviously we're gonna get into the story and how that all kind of goes. And the basic concept is that we have a bounty hunter who sort of has a cursed eye and wants to avenge her father and find her father's killer. And it's got very much sort of Afro samurai feel to it and a variety of other things going on with it as well. Robin Hood Zenescope sort of also comes to mind. So how did that all spin out of this? Because I think that is what people want to know, because that Kickstarter is currently going on. I think you're over your original goal, and so the book's going to happen. And obviously the more funding that occurs gets kicked into issue 2, gets kicked into other better production values, and allows this series to continue as forward and reach its full production in many ways. So where did that even come from and the inspiration come from?
who wants to take this? You want to do it?
Big question.
Nope.
She's gonna be really shy through this whole thing.
Shy.
She's super shy.
No.
Not in real life. I don't feel like doing
We have some other. Alice and I have had some other ideas. I think Alice has watched a lot of me working on books, and so she's added a lot of feedback and input, and eventually I was just like, oh yeah, well, why don't you just make one? You know, if you got all these great ideas, it's like a couple fighting. You know, I was just like, oh well, if you think you can do better, then so I think it was a mix of things, really. I think of elements. I think one of the things we talked about doing was just first off, easing her into the process, getting her familiar with the process of working with a team on something like this. You know, she's an artist herself and does a lot of visual art, but this was something she kind of wanted to observe this process this time and actually get her feet wet and get involved. I think was the whole idea.
And I think, I mean, for me, just having more things out there with such a strong female presence and that kind of thing was important. And it was something that, you know, he hadn't worked with, and maybe having me involved would help him have that kind of female voice. And then of course with Gwen in this too, you know, we have, you know, it's not men writing females. That doesn't always work out well. It's, you know, there's actually women having some input, which I think for me is good anyway.
Yeah, so then we got Scott Wilke to write it, which is a man. So
I feel like we talk a lot.
We do.
If anything's like, oh, girl.
I wish I could. I don't know if we should, but I really want to share our group chat, like for Dead. I mean, because we got the whole team in there. Our letters.
We'll see who the pervs are.
We haven't announced our letterer yet, but like the whole team's in there now, and it's so funny just reading through the conversation. I'll be gone. I won't even read the conversation for a few days, and you guys would have been talking back and forth, and I'll go back through the messages and just crack up. So it's a really funny group working on the book, which, well, I guess we'll talk about the rewards at some point, but there's some pretty funny things in there. But, you know, the whole Western not having really strong female lead, I think it's because we're ignorant, and I think there are probably strong female leads out there in Westerns.
There's more and more.
But we were eating out somewhere and talking about it, and there wasn't really any that were really coming to mind. So we were like, well, we could do that. And then started thinking about it more. And I was like, man, I can't write a Western. You can't write a Western. We want to make a Western. We need to find someone that's written Westerns. Yeah. And I was like, well, I know a guy who loves this stuff, is great at writing in general. You could throw him into any genre and he could do a great job. And that's Scott Wilke. And so we were like, that's easy. Yeah. So that's really what started the whole thing.
So to even go off of that point, because this is super interesting, where you're obviously involved in producing it and creating it, and obviously putting together the team in many ways. And so what is that like, knowing what your strengths are and what your strengths aren't? Because I think sometimes in comic creation, people say, hey, I could do everything. And let's be realistic, there are writers, even in the big guys, DC, Marvel, Image, and they can't do everything. And so what was that like for you to realize that, and both of you to realize that, and then go out and hire Scott and get Scott involved, knowing that Scott is good at this particular writing style? Because it does state something about saying, hey, you know what, I can do an okay job at this, but somebody else can do a better job and deliver what this book should be.
So that's a really good and loaded question, because like, you know, I had to go out in the woods and live there for quite a while just to accept the fact that I'm not the best person for the job. You know, like when you get to a point when you're like, I'm incapable, and you can say that and know that, but that doesn't mean that you have to give up on the idea. You just have to get a good partner involved. And you know, that was Scott. You know, Scott's really brought a lot to the story. I mean, Gwen has too, Alice has, I mean, everyone has, but, you know, Scott is really the one that sat down and really built out the characters on paper and wrote their dialogue and everything and did a really good job with it. So I think that's, for Scott, it's not hard to trust him, just because, you know, Scott and I have talked a lot over time and agree a lot on just everything, really. Like, you know, I think we're both summer blockbuster writers. I don't know if that, would you agree with that, Scott?
Yeah, totally.
Yeah. So I think we want to write fun, memorable stories that you could see on the big screen, and your whole family would Dead End Moon might be the exception, but your whole family would have fun. Like, it's memorable and it's easily accessible. It's not too heavy into any particular demographic. I think it's meant to be broad and well received by many walks of life. So that's the whole idea, and make it fun. Like, fun's the word to keep going back to. Fun.
And then to jump into, what were you saying? I'm sorry for interrupting.
No, you're fine. I think Mike and Alice definitely deserve more credit than I think they're giving themselves, because a writer is definitely not good until a good idea is proposed. So, like with Undercity Tales, for example, I mean, Mike's the master at like elevator pitches, I think, because he sold that to me in like a single conversation in 5 seconds, and like my mind was just whirring out of control with possibilities. So, I mean, a lot of due credit needs to go to Mike and to Alice, of course, for Dead End Moon. But yeah, just want to put that out there.
So yeah. I'm going to pitch an analogy here. So you are what Joe Bruscia and Ralph Tedesco are for Raven Gregory on the Zenescope Wonderland series, where Joe Bruscia and Ralph pitched very much the idea and helped to build out the concept and some of the characters, and then Raven wrote the scripts in many ways. And Raven was sort of spearheading it and had a lot of input into it, but Joe and Ralph provided a lot of those ideas and raw materials. And so that's what it sounds like between Mike and Alice and Scott. That's sort of what it sounds like, where it's very much that everybody's bringing something to the table in that regard on how this entire process is being written and done. And I think that's the best way I could describe it. Because Wonderland from Zenescope, and I'm dropping certain hints, and Mike knows why I'm dropping these hints. He knows why, because when we get to the rewards, there's a whole bunch of stuff that is going to be dropped. But that's sort of how I view this entire relationship, and both parts need each other in order for something to be produced extremely well.
Yeah. Exactly. Yep.
So now I really want to get into this, because I think this is super interesting. There's a lot of moving components to Dead End Moon, and I think the best place to start is with Maggie. So obviously we have a very strong female character who has a cursed eye, who basically, as I stated, is a bounty hunter, and she's sort of dealing with supernatural elements in a Western, and her guns don't really miss. So we got a lot of cool stuff going on. We got a Tomb Raider vibe going on. We obviously got Robin Hood from Zenescope. Legitly, like the Cursed Eye, Robin Hood. It's definitely similar to that, but it's also set in a Western, and there is that idea of revenge out there, and I love a good revenge story. So what was like the inspiration for her? Because there are comics that are lacking strong female characters, and then there are comics that have them, but they don't seem to get much attention as of lately. And so what was that like? Because obviously you want to play to the Western side of things and keep those rules, bend them slightly with the supernatural elements in them, but you also don't want to detract from a strong female badass character at the same time. So what was that entire character building out? Because obviously all three of you had to work on building out her character, because it does hit.
I feel like a lot of it came from kind of making just those small decisions along the way of, well, childhood to teenage years, and some of those things that kind of really, as people in general, we end up kind of using to become who we are. So I think having those discussions about those kinds of past and present and the things that led her to becoming who she is were kind of one of the starting points, really, for figuring out who Maggie is and what her goals are, or her fears, if she even has any. Things like that, just the personality, and what kind of language she would speak based on that. Would it be more intellectual? Would it be more just, pretty plain and Southern kind of Western, or, the kinds of words she would and wouldn't use, all these kinds of conversations that we would have along the way. I don't know if I really answered the question.
You did.
Okay.
In a part, you know.
And I'm taking away anybody else who's thinking.
Redeemer. No, she's right. Like we, you know, Scott wrote dialogue, and then we were like, well, this doesn't seem like this is how she would sound, or something like that. Or then Scott would write something else that sounded really good, and so then we would compromise or change really our perspective of what the character was.
I feel like
So
we always challenge each other to justify the decisions,
yeah,
so that the best decision always gets made.
Absolutely. So that I think, so I need to read Robin Hood, because you're not the first person to bring that up to me. So I know I'm familiar with Zenoscope, and I saw the character, and I was like, all right, so I've got to figure out more. So the Cursed Eye thing, I wasn't aware of that comparison, but the thing about everything that we built was like the Cursed Eye was like a discussion that we had one day. I think Scott, that wasn't something in the beginning. I think we just decided on designing the character, and then started creating a story around that. And everything was done in a very odd way. Like it wasn't like we didn't write the character completely and then start. We were developing the art and the script along with just these conversations along the way. So we would go backward and say, well, let's redact this or whatever. Let's do something different with the explanation here.
Yeah. Well, maybe it might start like, oh, well, what if she has an eye patch? Oh, well, what if instead of that she has a scar? Well, instead of a scar in her eye, she has, you know, the cursed eye. And
the cursed
so
eye.
there's kind of that whole elevation change there.
Scott, you say something. We've been talking too much.
Oh, no, you're fine. No, I think to echo Mike's statements, it did start off kind of in an awkward way, but I think it made it as organic as it is because of that. Because Mike sent me over like a 5-page treatment or 5-page script that he had done, and there's a character, I don't know if I want to reveal the name, but that character sold me on like the whole series. I'm like, all right, I get what he's doing, I get this vision that they're creating. So what I did is just for fun, I made the 5. So you can actually see it on the Kickstarter. It's the 5 pages. I wrote those first, and I'm like, how about this as the setup? You know, this kind of establishes who this character is and what she's willing to sacrifice, who she's willing to sacrifice, and then just creating the voice from there. For me, that's always the most difficult thing. And writing a female character, I've never written a lead female character. Everett Forge has some, you know, side characters that are female. So I was nervous to do that, but I think I have a lot of strong women in my life, which helps with that. So my mom, my wife, my 6-year-old daughter. So when I'm writing those scenes, I'm like, how would my wife handle this? I'm like a badass. So, and then thankfully we have Alice and Gwen on the team to kind of be like, I don't know if they freaking say that. That's a dude, because that's the worst thing for me when a guy's writing a female character. You can hear that male voice coming through. It's just, it takes you out of the story. So I'm very thankful that half this team is female and can, you know, vouch for the things that we're creating.
And to even go off of that, because obviously Maggie is a sexy character and she is attractive, but I feel though that that's not the driving force, where this isn't, to me, an eye candy book. You know, this isn't, you know, eating cake and cheesecake type of book. You know, she's a badass killing machine in many ways. Not to ruin anything. I mean, I think it's pretty safe to say if she's going after and trying to avenge her father's death, she's going to be killing some shit. So what was that like, finding that nice balance? Because there are a bunch of, you know, attractive women who are killing machines. I mean, we look at Tomb Raider and that entire character. She's an attractive character who can kill and do badass shit. And I don't see how Maggie is any different in that regard. And so that's something that I think is a nice touch. And I think that it was balanced very well in this first issue. So what was that like, finding that balance? Because sometimes books tend to go one way or the other and don't sort of hit that sweet spot in the middle.
To me, I think more maybe about all of like the really badass women in history that we hardly ever hear about, all dating back before the Civil War. And I mean, there's all these cases of, you know, women who were spies who did all these amazing things that people don't hear about, or, you know, going off and doing like a full-on vengeance thing. And I mean, even in, you know, classic Western True Grit, you know, there's this little girl who is seeking vengeance, who, you know, is, I think, maybe 14 or something like that. And so I think there are just all these cases that in real life, even outside of any kind of comic realm, that can be such great things to be thinking about, that kind of helped with that too. That's my perspective.
I think, you know, to add to that, like, you know, the mentioning of like a sexy character and everything like that. We talked about this early on.
Yeah.
There's a really bad stigma out there that the belief is that if you have a character that is nude, or if you have nude covers, nude prints, that suddenly you've depreciated the quality of the book and the story. And it's the craziest thing I've ever heard, because we as Westerners living in a Western society, we can blow the freaking heads off everything. We can show every part of you inside. Like, I can show you guts, organs, anything. We're cool with it. We can still have a great story if that happens, and if we put that on full display. But if we show someone naked in their natural state, it's the worst thing ever, and we're selling out, and the story can't be good. So I think that stigma is one thing that I wanted to attack. We both talked about that because we think that's just absolute bullshit. And the people that say that, man, I just they have a very, very narrow view of art.
I mean, to me, in some ways, if nothing else, it really just kind of is an even more misogynistic view in some ways, just because it is, oh, so then you must be, you know, trying to monetize. So you're assuming that that's why someone would do it.
Like, everybody wants to make money,
that.
but
I mean, like a body, you know, so a body can only be naked if it's for profit.
Yeah.
But like, that's not what I'm about.
So one of our first motivations with this, and I was definitely motivated to do this, and I know Scott and I even talked about this too, and Glenn's even chipped in on this too, is that we wanted to disprove that belief system, and we wanted to really make a substantially really well written story that is not just about selling prints. It's come for the prints, but stay for the story. You know, come for that art, be attracted to the book because of the art and all the, you know, whatever that is. But, you know, you're going to read the book and you're going to love the book, like 100%.
Yeah. I mean, Maggie Dean is exactly who and what she wants to be at all times. So.
Yeah.
And to piggyback off of like what Alice said, we have no qualms when it's a scantily clad male in comics, or a superhero where you can see every ripple in his body, and those are fine. But the minute you show a little bit too much of a female, it's, you know, you're doing porn basically. But so that's why I was really sold on this, because Alice and Mike created this bigger universe. That, because I think I was naive when I first started writing comics, and I was like, I'm not gonna, you know, lower myself to that. Like, I'm gonna make good stories, and I thought that for some reason innately meant that I had to steer away from that type of look. But in reality, you don't have to, because it's Maggie's power is her power, and that's whether it's her body, her special eye, whatever. So, and the key for me was to make sure that she wasn't like a Mary Sue, you know, where there's nothing she can't do. So she's flawed. She's a normal human. She's got issues. She's got, you know, her curse is her power. Her power is her curse, is her weakness, but it also gives her the ability to fight. She's just such a layered character, and Mike and Alice set that up so perfectly. You know, it was just fun to write her. So
all those weaknesses are human.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
She is still human. For now.
So I
you can tell Scott's done a great job of he's had fun writing this. You can tell too, because, you know, like, people haven't got to really read. I mean, we haven't debuted the lettering yet or anything like that. We've just shown art so far, so we've just been pimping Scott out so much. People haven't even got to really read his dialogue yet. So we're going to show that off here pretty soon. I think we're just waiting on an alteration to one page, and then we're gonna share the first 5 pages with the lettering, and you'll get to read all the dialogue. And those first 5 pages, I mean, I've read through it just a few times today, and I still smile because he's done such a great job of, again, creating a great voice for Maggie that definitely feels like Maggie.
Yeah.
Doesn't feel like that's Scott talking. Doesn't feel like it's any of us talking.
Oh, I want a beer.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Me too. I want a beer.
So to even go further off of this, because I don't want to push too hard and ruin what's going on with Maggie and where it's going, but every hero or every person seeking revenge needs a person to seek on, needs a villain, and we have what is quote and labeled, might be the name, I'm not exactly sure, but the Dead Man. And obviously this is the person supposedly who killed Maggie's father. Maggie wants revenge. I'm sure it's a bit more complicated than we all know at the moment. Definitely this guy looks like one of the 4 horsemen, looks like a Grim Reaper type character, and obviously looks like the complete antithesis of what Maggie is, and looks like death in many ways. And so obviously this is a perfect character for a Western. When you think of a supernatural Western, this is like what you think of. And so how was this character built? And I don't know how far issue 1 goes with this character, and I don't know how far you want to reveal what's going on exactly, but obviously there's something in play that's a little bit deeper than what's let on.
Scott, you want to take this one?
That's a tough one because I don't know how much more to give away.
I just want to blame it on you.
Yeah. It touches upon him enough that you'll be coming back for issue 2 for sure. The design though, that was one of the characters that stole me on it when he was originally I wanted to inject myself into this project in any way I could. So I was like, I'll proofread it, I'll edit it, whatever you want me to do, let me be a part of this. Because after I saw, drafts of what Maggie would look like, the Hansel, I'll give away his name after I heard about that character in there, and then Dead Man, I'm like, I need to be a part of this. So yeah, the Dead Man is the quintessential Western villain, and then not, if that makes any sense. Like, there's a lot to him, and shit, I don't know, man. I don't know how much more to give away. He's as badass as he looks. He's even more
Ask
badass.
another question, Andrew. Get him off this. He's gonna give it all away.
But as cool as people think he looks, he's that significantly cooler once he's revealed on the script and panels.
So there's a lot of emotion and baggage attached to this character, to put it nicely, without giving too much away. That actually makes somebody care about this character, and this character just isn't just standing there doing acts. And I'll throw out a reference. This character is like Justice from Afro Samurai. And if anybody knows that, and
yeah,
if you see Justice and you start understanding Afro Samurai. And I'm using as many analogies as I know. Again, I'm like 28, so my narrow vision of society is like the last 10 years. So clearly, so I'm not going to push too hard on that. And now let's just dive into the rewards, because I think that's what's the most fascinating component about all of this. And so, obviously, I am a huge Zenescope fan. I am a huge Aspen fan. And we're going to get to some of that stuff. I think clearly Mike knows what I'm referring to when I drop that down. But I do want to talk about digital stuff before, because there is digital, and you can pick this up digitally. And so I am curious, because there's a long debate right now in a lot of these Kickstarter groups and comic groups, and it's been for a while now. And I am curious how you guys feel about digital. Because I feel that for the last 3 years, there's been a very stigmatizing view on digital. And now I feel like that's changed because of COVID. And so I am curious about digital, because I like reading digital comics. I like the fact that they're cheaper. They're more easily in my hands, faster. And sometimes I don't have $10 or $20 or $40 to back a Kickstarter, but I have $5 to back one. And so I'm just curious how all 3 of you feel about digital and where that's going, especially I feel like COVID has changed that a lot, and the stigmatization, as well as the fact that I felt people were leaving a lot of money on the table.
I think it's made it really accessible. I mean, kind of like you were talking about, where we're in a kind of a time where people are so starved for content and things like that, but they also maybe don't have that same kind of budget to work with that they maybe had, a year ago. So I think having all that, the digital stuff is something that does make it more accessible and just more available for a wider range of people, just because it's an affordable thing, and it's something that can be more instant, especially if they want it now, kind of as soon as possible, kind of thing. They don't necessarily have to wait for rewards to come in or the print to happen and all that stuff. So I'm a fan of digital, and I've had to teach digitally and virtually a lot lately, and I feel like it's something that sometimes it can be something to overcome if you're not familiar, but at the same time, once you have it, you can kind of have it with you at all times too. So it's in a lot of ways more portable than maybe the print issue, which can be kind of an added bonus, really. Stuck waiting for your COVID test, and you can read this book.
So I'll jump in on this one because I'm old school. I like to have everything physically, but I'm a dinosaur, and I think about my niece who's 21, and she reads comics and stuff, and I never knew this about her because I always thought as she was growing up, she was makeup tutorials and all about just not anything that would really make me think that she would be in the comics anyway. But then she surprised me one day and talked about webtoons and how often she's on there reading, and there's this whole culture, there's a whole generation, younger generation than us, that just swarms to webtoons and services like that. And that stuff's just steadily giving you content. It's more aligned with the Netflix of the world and things of that nature. So comic distribution, there's so much of it now. There's so many places you can get content that getting it to people as quickly as possible is almost part of the pitch, and digital does that. And digital makes it more affordable to make books. I mean, if we didn't have to print the books, if that was no longer a format, we could make more books. We're not making as much money off the books, but we're also saving on print and shipping costs. Mm-hmm. But
it can reach more people. It can,
it can reach more people. I want to have the thing in my hand, I like having it physically. And I think there's a whole market of people that will always prefer physical. And so I think that's where Kickstarter really thrives, is people getting exclusive physical elements that they wouldn't get from a retailer or get from Comixology or any other digital platform like Spinwiz or any of those other places. It would be just all impersonal, and I think that's the one thing that Kickstarter helps with, is it keeps the physical alive, although there's still a lot of people that back digitally. But it's still, it allows for that print to continue on, because you got to think, people buy vinyl records, right? And by no means is that the best audio format out there. Well, some people argue with me on that one. Let me be careful with it. It is a collector's edition format of your favorite album, right? You can't pop a vinyl in your car. You're going to listen to it through Spotify, right? So that vinyl's there to cherish it and to have it. You kind of consider it a valuable album because it's in that format, it's a personal connection to it, right? And I think that's how we all treat the physical format of comics.
Or it's the place to hold your drugs. You need the place to hold every once in a while. Back in the day. Just say it. We
hide our drugs all over the place, man. We're hiding that stuff everywhere. So, what about you, Scott?
I think like you, Mike, I was very at first anti-digital. I prefer the physical copies. To this day, I still, but I think my first foray into digital, I had to host a steampunk comic book panel at Phoenix Comic Con. So I needed to really refresh myself on steampunk comics, and I needed the art so I could put it in a PowerPoint. So I'm like, let's just hit up Comixology, and that's when I really realized the bang for the buck that you get. Because man, I polished through like 10 comics. I spent maybe $20, and I'm like, wow, I got a lot of entertainment for a little bit of money. Found a whole bunch of artists, writers that I wasn't necessarily familiar with, so I got introduced to their works, and then I end up getting the physical copies of their stuff. But I think it's nice to be able to delve in and just test out something before you invest, $40 on a Kickstarter. If like, hey, I'll check his stuff out on Comixology or whatever real quick and see if it's good. And then if it is, there you go. Kind of like a little trial size or appetizer or something like that. So
well said.
Yeah.
And do you feel that digital also is a gateway where somebody who might not back your Kickstarter, for instance, might say, hey, I'm willing to risk $5. And then when you do a second one, especially on a first issue or even like a third issue, maybe that, all of a sudden I could catch up real quick. And then when you come back for the second or third or fourth issue, now I'm in, because a lot of times Kickstarters, and I think you've done this also, Mike, where you can get the physical issues from the last issue as well in like a second issue. And so you could catch up also if you really like it. And so if you're back digital, you can always go back later. And I've seen that done a lot of times, especially with like regular cover A's, for lack of a better definition here, of a book. So that's how I view also digital. I don't know if you guys view it similar to the way I do it.
Yeah, I'd agree with you.
Yeah, because I've had on my last Kickstarter, because that was issue 3, I had a couple people reach out that they checked out issue 1 on Comixology, and then they ended up actually getting the physical copies of issue 3, 2, and 1. So totally agree with that.
And then since we're talking about physical copies, we might as well just dive into this. So obviously there is a bunch of physical rewards. So there is the original cover done by Gwen, and so she did the original. And then there's a bunch of variants. And this is where this gets fun. And this is my sector, because I'm a big comic book collector. I tend to deal with comics. I buy and sell a lot of comics. I speculate on comics. And so obviously, I think Gwen did another cover called The Hunt. And then Angel Moon did a cover, Moonlight Brawl. And I'm not sure what these two covers are referencing. So you guys can fill me in on what those two covers are referencing, because the rest, I have a pretty good idea what they're referencing.
So just to correct one thing, Gwen's only done one cover so far. She's done the main cover, and there's a cover that looks very similar to her art style. It's actually done by Kevin Anthony De Castro, which he goes by Teven. I don't know. You say it either way. So he did the Hunt, and then Moonlight Brawl was done by Angel Moon, who I wasn't as familiar with. I just came across his art, and I just loved the style. It looked like it was Overwatch. Like he looked like a concept artist for Overwatch or League of Legends. And I messaged him and asked him about that. Coincidentally, he has done stuff for. So I was like, well, perfect. I would love to see this character in your art style. And he was that was the second art piece that was done on the book. It was very early on. So he helped shape the look.
So to even talk about that, because I'm going to take a guess here where you reach out. ArtStation is kind of one of the places, and there's a few others, maybe DeviantArt. And I don't know if there's a third, but obviously, how does that even process go for you looking for people? Because it's just like you just like literally say you're scrolling and you're like, that's cool, and let me see if that person's interested. Or do you actually have a list of people that you say, hey, I know that I want person A to do a cover, and I don't really care? Or is it a mixture of both? Because obviously everybody works differently on projects.
That was by accident. It was very random. And most of the time, it's funny that you mentioned that because I just built an Excel file of all the artists, writers, editors, cover artists, artists that do better interiors than covers, which I won't tell you who's on that list. Like literally every profession, interviewers, everybody on a master list with contact information. So that way, when I do more projects, I can just filter and remind myself of who all's out there. So when I built that list, it's like 200 people. I was like, holy crap, I didn't realize how many people I knew. Okay. And it's not done. That's the thing. I started with Facebook though. Just meet friends on Facebook, people that have added me, I've added. I see someone's art, I add them. I want to follow them. And what happens is over time, there are certain artists you become more attracted to because you see more of their style and how they've evolved. And so you start to subconsciously start thinking of a story that would pair well with that artist. So I think part of it's starting with the artist and wanting to work with them. You know, I think Dead and Moon early on, it was Gwen was like kind of the foundation of doing the book was because we loved her art. So it started with her. But as far as these cover artists and stuff, I mean, that's just mostly before we get into the JC Fabel and Brian McNay stuff. But those were just people that we came across and knew. You know, Taven, however you want to say it, he did a cover for us, but he also did a pinup for Undercity Tales that Scott and I worked on. So, you know, some of these people were just people. Gwen, same thing actually, Scott. Gwen. First time ever working with Gwen was pin up for Undercity Tales. So these are people we worked with before. Yeah. Did I answer that question? I answered it how I wanted to. All right.
I want to say, I hope it was your question.
Your question, not bad. I'm going to modify that.
My answer is way more interesting.
I'm just going to ramble until it makes sense.
And since you dropped it, JC Fabel and Brian Managay, I want to say it. I'm probably not going to get that name right, so forgive me. And hopefully the gods won't strike me down with lightning. Obviously, there's a set of 3 covers, and then there's Z-rated covers. So I want to deal with the clean side first. Obviously, there's, I believe, what is called Knight Rider. It is the first cover, and I think it's either a white horse or a black horse. I think, and it looks very much like Lady Death type of vibe. And so I like this cover. It's awesome, I think, and I just like the lady vibe compared to it, very Western. And so where did that idea come from? Because obviously, or was it just that say, hey, just take a shot and throw something out there? Or how much guidance do you give? Because indie comics versus mainstream comics, you know, different companies and different people have different guidance they provide.
Yeah. The horse was something that we thought of early on as having a different persona during the day and night. So those 2 pairs of covers really represent the horse more than anything, really. So Knight Rider is just really what that horse is really like. And then what it is during the day is more of a
facade.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And then diving into the second one, and I don't know if anybody knows this, but so after my first interview with Mike, and I don't know if you remember this, he sends me a cover, and it's a Keith Garvey cover of, I believe, Alice or Violet with the Cheshire Cat as a rug laying out in like sitting by, or no, it's Cinderella, I think, laying out with it because it's Cinderella.
I think it's Alice.
Yeah, Alice.
I think it's Alice from Alice and then Cheshire Cat. Because when I saw that, I was so pissed because we did our cover. We've had that forever because we sat on Dead and Moon for a while. A lot of this art was completed 6 or 7 months ago. And we really sat on this for a long time because I was promoting another book, and I'm really, up until recently, I've tried to just promote one book at a time and just dedicate all my energy into that one book. And I won't share anything else up until that book's done, shipped to backers, and then I start talking about the next one. So Dead and Moon was just like, hush hush, and I'd share it with some friends. So like I shared that I saw that Zenescope cover, and I was like, well, I think ours is better. That's just me. I know I sound biased, but I felt like ours was better. But I saw it and I was like, man, we're gonna do it anyway.
So the reason why I like this cover is that this is done by one of my favorite artists who did the Zenescope cover, Keith Garvey. And I was Keith Garvey's first official interview. So that's why I love this cover. And I just think it's funny. I think it's an amazing interpretation. And I think it's just such an homage to it. And I think this cover is just the best one out of the batch. This one's called Fireside, and I think it just hits the nail on the head of, something that you're just stop and dead stop. Like if I saw this cover, the clean version or the Z-rated or nude version, however you want to call it, or uncensored version, in a store, I would stop at both of them. And I think that's what this cover does really efficiently, more so than the other two, in my opinion. And that's why I love this cover. And so that's why I want to talk about it. And I know that you sent me that thing, and that's why I just love it. So that's something that I think is arguably the best cover out of the batch, in my opinion. Cool. And then the third cover very much references Aspen, J. Scott Campbell, and a few other artists have done stuff similar to, which is the girl in the bathtub. And obviously the clean version, the water is very much, I guess, colored, for lack of a better word. So you get that element of sexiness. Dirty water, we could call it that too. And then the uncensored version is clear and reveals everything. So obviously, what was that like building that one out? Because that is also a very familiar cover, much like the Garvey cover as well, where those two covers, you see them, you stop. If you're scrolling through this Kickstarter, you recognize both of those covers so quickly, and it just registers in people's heads who are big comic book fans.
We decided that if we're going to do nude covers, that they were going to be very character driven. We didn't want them to just be her at the beach in a bikini, because that's just not realistic of the time. So, and I think we'll continue with that theme always. So you're never going to see her in like a cheerleader outfit and absurd circumstances. It's all going to be relevant to the time. So the Knight Rider cover, and then during the daytime she's nude riding the horse. We call that cover Godiva. She's that kind of woman where she could do that during the day and not care what anyone thinks. What's
somebody gonna say?
She's that powerful to where she can do whatever she wants. She wanted to ride bareback on a horse. She can do that, So, and then the Fireside's kind of the same thing. There's this playful nature to her, but at the same time, she's laying on top of something that she just killed.
Yeah.
So
it's very like cat and mouse to me, but everyone else is a mouse and she's the only cat.
Right. Yeah. And then where you have this last one of her in the tub. So there's obviously a kind of like a sensual component to all of these. Her being in the bathtub, she's wounded in the bathtub, and those are healing waters that she's in right now. So there's a magical concoction in the water there that helps her restore her wounds, because when you look at the other cover and the water's drained and she's naked, the wounds are gone. So that plays into the story. So these are all things that tie into the narrative to a degree. There we agreed that if we were going to do that, then we would want to make sure it includes the narrative elements.
And then to even go further off this, because this I think is your first forte into nude rated covers, uncensored covers, and obviously, and I'm going to bring up something and might go into a little bit of dangerous territories, but Black Jackets, which is your other work, is definitely more of an old age book. It wouldn't work. Nudity doesn't work in that book.
I can't. I wouldn't. They're all like 8. There's like one character that's 18.
and so,
yeah.
The reason why I bring this up is because Chuck Pino kind of talks about this as an editor, where certain things you can do nudity, certain things you can't. Certain books you can't curse, certain books you can. Language is important. And so what has this been like to be able to have more of an adult book and have this unlocked. Because if you did this in Black Jackets, it just wouldn't work. It would be a failure in many ways, because that's not the type of story it is. But in this story, in Dead End Moon, it works completely to go down this route. And so what has that been like to have that freedom?
Pretty liberating. I think I learned early on too, and I think Scott's kind of seconded this, I think we did Dead End Moon at the right time because we're early on enough in our career and as a potential publishing house to branch out and try different things without having any kind of stigma attached to us, which I think is really important. I think if you establish earlier on that you can do anything, that you're just not this type of writer or a creator, I think that helps not pin you down with rules. So, I've had people messaging me about obviously this book. They said the cheesecake. What I mean? Like I had to early on. I had to look that up because I wasn't as familiar with it, but I totally get it now. And I've got a lot of creator friends that talk about hey, doing a cheesecake book's kind of like an easy route. It's kind of a it's its own set of challenges too. And I thought about that a lot because it is in a way for someone who established early on that they would never do that or never try to push past those boundaries. And I mean, knowing Alice as well as I do, and us know, and I'm not saying she's a freak in the bed, just knowing like her and I, like she's one of the first people to be like, fuck it, let's do it, and
that's your one effort.
And and I thought the same thing. I was like, you know what? It's pretty liberating to say, for the sake of the story, if it fits it, do it. And be bold, like that's the phrase I keep hearing is be bold, take the risks, push boundaries. If somebody says that you can't do something or you shouldn't, that's a clear sign that you should. So that's, I think we're going to continue to do that. I mean, granted, we'll never do Nudes of Black Jackets. So you shouldn't do that. Like, that's just like, that's a different set of reasons there. But, as soon as I'm in a conversation with the creator, and it happens often, they're like, yeah, I just don't think that's the right route, or I don't think I would do things like that, or I don't know if that's right for me. I'm like, great, glad it's totally right for me. Like, we're all comfortable with this.
Well, this book to me is like, well, what would Maggie do? And Maggie would do it.
Yeah.
I mean, I feel like it's so,
well said.
It's still very true to her, the person whose story we're telling.
Mm-hmm.
And to me, sometimes that message is more important than, what other people think.
I was telling this, it was really funny. Like, I didn't know how much we would bring this up because we haven't really talked about it at all, really, because of the controversy around this kind of stuff. And maybe we're bringing it up more than you are, but we've been talking about it a lot lately, just because where it started to pick up momentum, the book's doing really well on Kickstarter. I think that's starting to become a conversation. I think there's going to be more creators that do this kind of thing.
So to even add fire, I guess, air to the flames or fan the flames, one of the things about uncensored books, nude books, is that on Kickstarter, they tend to fetch more money. They tend to be a higher reward tier in many ways as well. And so there is this entire discussion. And I hate to keep using Zenescope, but Zenescope's a great example of this, where their nude books go for $100 a piece. Or they go for $50 a piece versus a $20 price tag. And so you have to sell a hell of a lot less nude books to make up versus unnude books, to equal the same price. And I think that your Kickstarter sort of follows that as well. And so what is that like for you as a business? Because even taking away the cheesecake element of it, at the end of the day, you want to fund, you want to get the book. You said it yourself really well where, hey, we might have a nude cover, but you're going to like the story too. And we have X to bring you in. And it's almost like you're implementing a funnel to some degree. And I had this discussion with somebody, and I'm not going to say who, and we had a disagreement live on the air on this show last week. And it was a civil disagreement. But it's this idea that I understand. It's the same thing with variant artists, where I'll come into a Kickstarter because I like a certain artist, or I want a nude cover, and then I might like the story, but I just want the art, and then that gets me in the door. And so I'm curious, as a potential publishing house, or even just getting funded, because you want to cross the borderline. And all of a sudden, if nude covers do that to some degree and you have the liberation to do it, I mean, you're a business. And so it's, in many ways, it's a business choice. And I'm an interviewer. There are certain guests that I purposely get on because it gets me what I need to get across to get other guests on. And I have no issue saying that publicly. And so I'm curious how all of you feel about that, because I think that's a really tricky space right now.
I feel like I'm gonna hog answers. I got like so many answers for this one.
Anyway.
Yeah, Scott too. I really want to get you on this one too. But so let me try to summarize that question. So, are you asking that we are?
How do you feel about nude covers as a business decision?
Sure. Okay.
Versus just because we can do it in liberation versus artistic. If that makes
sense.
As
a business decision, I think it's made perfect sense because you can kind of see it in the result. Again, it was our first time trying to do something like this. I was, talking with Alice, I hadn't promoted any, really many of the variant covers until the launch of the Kickstarter. We really held stuff back. We got people pulled in just with Gwen's art, and we got people pulled in, just with the premise alone, and that Scott was involved. And then when the Kickstarter launched, then the store was open, right? So then you could go in and see what all's available. What's funny, and I obviously can't share names from the Kickstarter or anything like that, but I made a conscious point to go down the list of backers. And through names alone, I think you can almost always determine gender. Not always, but for most part, there's certain names that just lean certain ways. And we've had more female backers on this book than any other book I've ever done, which is one thing to boot. We've had more females involved with this book than I've ever worked on before. And we've had more female artists interested in this book more than anything else that I've done before too. I think this kind of using it as a business tool, I think it brings in a certain demographic of people that like Zenescope and stuff like you're mentioning, but I don't think we're really trying to go down the Zenescope path, because it's almost like there's a disappointment if they don't do that, right? There's like a certain expectation that if you have a Zenescope book that you kind of have to deliver on that, I guess, maybe. And I might be looking at it from the outside in. But it's kind of like something that they're really well known for, right? Is definitely
it's actually tricky because Zenescope is known for two things: strong female leads and cheesecake exclusives. That's what, and then really good female leads, bringing in top DC and formal writers on their books and having really well done, intricate stories. But then also having that cheesecake side to it too, having promiscuous covers to some degree, having very playful covers, and having exclusives. So Zenescope's entire model is that they have the goods to back it up, but they also have that type of cover stuff that and their business model has proven extremely well, and it's proven better than ever.
Yeah, they're growing, right? I mean, and they've got great artists that work on their stuff, right? Like I've contacted a few of those artists. Just actually this week, heard back from two that work with them a lot. I don't think we're really trying to. If we go down the publishing route or self-publishing route and actually create a publishing house, which I think we're kind of not there nearly yet. I still have a lot to learn, but we don't want there to be any kind of certain expectations. So like we'd rather be like a film production studio where God knows what we'll put out, like, hey, if I sat down and talked with you and said, hey, what kind of movies does Universal Pictures put out? What kind of movies does Warner Brothers put out? You'd be like, everything. And that's kind of what we want to be known for too. So that's kind of one stipulation with it. Now, as far as the use of naughty covers and things like that, you know, I think a lot of what you have to do in terms of marketing, and Zenoscope probably does a great job of this too. Since you mentioned this, I need to read some Zenoscope books apparently. Is there's the film trailer and then there's the film, right? And you know, the film trailer is what's going to make you buy a ticket so that you sit down and watch the whole 2-hour movie, right? So you have to have a very good trailer to convince people that this is something they will want to see. Sometimes you show too much. Sometimes you show just enough. Whatever it is, there's definitely a delicate balance there with a film trailer that you have to give them the hook in 2 minutes. And so I think that when you create a Kickstarter page, when you market covers and things like that, that's your film trailer. That's what's going to get people to open up your book and read the great story that's inside there. So that would be my maybe answer to that one in general. Scott, you want to say something so I shut up?
No, you're good. I think the key too is that none of the sexuality, none of the nudity is gratuitous. It serves a purpose at some level. Like Healing Waters, that cover, she's not just naked in a bathtub for shits and giggles. Like she's in there to heal. So there's always like a component to that. And I think a good example, we had somebody comment on one of Mike's posts, like commenting on Magpie's concept art, that she was happy to see that she wasn't in like stilettos, that she was in, you know, boots. She was in, you know, just form-fitting clothing. She wasn't in, you know, a fishnet skirt and like a crop top. So we can appreciate the female figure without being just so, I don't know, whatever you want to say, but, you know, putting her in a bra and panties, you know?
Yeah. Well, that's just not practical.
Exactly.
You're not objectifying somebody
exactly
for no good reason.
Exactly. And like Mike said, I've experienced it too. The ones who I've had not pushback, but, you know, like, oh, you're doing that, it's been male creators. The female creators, female comic book readers have been very appreciative of what I've shown and what Mike's shown from comments I've seen on his Facebook posts. So I think, again, I don't know if men trying to be heroes or what, but it's like, you know, it's okay. It's not, I don't know, you know, it's tough. So it's tough to speak to that being a man as well. So
sometimes what it is that, especially other creators, I hate to say this, but there's a lot of politicking going on, and sometimes some creators are just pissed they can't do it or they haven't done it yet, and they're like, great, now I'm not going to be able to do this, or me doing it now it looks like I'm emulating, because that happens too, where, you know, sometimes it's not about the issue, it's about saying, oh snap, that's doing really well, or it's really cool, and I'm just pissed that I didn't do it first. And now if I do it, I look like I'm copying or following the trend and not setting the trend. So I've noticed that too. And that's some of that, I think, is a play in it.
Definitely.
I think there's a lot of assumptions too that come into play. I think they just assume that there's going to be a very paper thin story behind this, you know, that we're just going to put all our chips down on nude women and hope for the best. But that is the complete opposite. I think all 4 of us have invested a lot of time and energy to create a very robust world, a very 3-dimensional characters across the board. It's ones that we haven't even seen yet in the concept art and pages. So it's not one or the other. You can have a comic that appreciates the female form and tells a good story.
Yeah.
I would agree with all of that.
Yeah, if you got an Alice Yurick answer to that, you wouldn't have all night. Mm-hmm. She would go for
or I would
get
grotesque or something.
Yeah, you know, it was important for us to have a female team, you know, like having and I think there are females out there that probably don't appreciate it. We probably, you know, probably upset some with that. And just like we've upset some male creators and friends that we know personally sometimes when you do things like this, but it's you know, just like anything else. I mean, you upset people when you cuss, you upset people when you do something really gory, you know, like you're I'm just here to find an audience and find the right audience for the right book, and I want to just be a master marketer. You know, I want to focus in on that first. Make sure every book finds its right audience.
Yeah. Well, it's you think about business strategy and things like that, and I mean, I guess if it were really and truly a business strategy, I feel like we would just stop making everything else and just do like titty stuff. But yeah, I don't think that's happening. We have too many other things and ideas to create.
this whole thing was just start off as the foundation for Alice to see the process and get more familiar with it, so that she can spin off and continue to do more independently, and try, so it's been great working with Gwen and Alice and Scott, just because we'll bounce something off each other and be like, hey, is this too much, or is this the right approach and stuff. And it's been nice to see a group celebrating together every new piece of art we get, or every decision we make in terms of the story. This is the most co-created book that I've had, that I've produced. And it's been exciting to see that, especially with the team makeup that we have.
Yeah, please continue.
Sorry. Just another tell that I think it's beyond just trying to sell books is, if that was the only goal, like Mike would have done the covers with her in a cheerleading costume, or her sitting out on the beach with a margarita, like keeping it confined to the reality of her world, keeping it confined to certain parameters. It should show our audience that this isn't about just to lure you in with a bait and switch, like, hey, naked lady, just kidding, crappy comic. So hopefully that's a tell as well, that we are trying to tell a really good story, but at the same time, just want to show what Maggie's got to offer.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm going to challenge that a little bit, and the reason why is that I think that the average comic reader now is much smarter than 5 years ago. And so I think that, you can't, 5 years ago, I think you could pull that a lot more efficiently. And the reason why I say this is that it's the same thing with movies. 5 years ago, a movie lasted, before it was bad, a month in the theater. Now we get 2 weeks. Obviously, pre-COVID, if a movie bombs, it's in and out of that theater like nobody knows. And I think comic books are the same thing. I know, because I read a lot. And if I hate a comic book, believe me when I tell you, I write a review on Goodreads, and I'm like, this is horrific. Same thing with an anime show that I'm watching that comes out. And obviously I'm a big Crunchyroll fan. And so I think people are very receptive that when something that they don't want to be, fooled, and that you can't give people something crappy. And that even with all these covers, I think if you give somebody a bad cover and then the cover is not related to the comic itself, or if it's a variant and obviously there's something else going on, with it, and it's purposely sort of stated, that's one thing. But I think that, people aren't as dumb as they used to be in this sector. And so I think you need to stay true to your book in many ways, I think is my point. And I think that if you're not, your book, you'll be able to get people to buy it once. But if you're looking to have 5-6 issues, if you're not true to your book and the covers with it, and they don't fit in or they don't tie in to some degree, I think you're going to lose audience members. So I tend to agree that you guys aren't producing a crappy book, and I think it's actually playing well, because I think everything has shifted now in the entire comic world, where you need to definitely tie in your covers to your books, especially on the indies, more so than ever. DC, Marvel can do whatever the hell they want to do, but if you're an indie Kickstarter, your cover needs to match what you're selling in many ways.
Yeah, I think there's a lot more just accountability in general, from the readers and from people, because giving feedback has become so much easier and things too. So like you talk about, you comment and people do, and they, especially even, with digital, they can have the PDF and be commenting before people even get the physical copy. So that accountability, I think, is kind of a driving force to really make sure that we keep ourselves on the correct path and remain true throughout as well.
I think another thing too is your fan base. It is whatever you make it, because you every decision you make will either cut out a supporter or gain a supporter. And so I mean, it's so funny because like we've had so much fun on this book. We're talking about some pretty serious elements, you know, as far as the comic making process and, you know, perception versus reality and all these different things. But, you know, a great example of this is late in the game, we decided as a stretch reward that we were going to make a version of this book where every drawn gun or pistol is now finger guns, and every horse is a hobby horse, and every sound effect with a gunshot is pew pew and all that stuff. And the whole book's basically being re-illustrated to be corny like this, right? And so I sent that through as an update through the project update on the Kickstarter and told everyone that that's something we're going to do. And got a lot of personal messages, got a lot of comments on the update, and everybody loved the idea. And that is more mirroring, that mirrors us as creators on this book post. We're all very corny people. If you read our group chat, it's amazing how corny we are as people. And it's a funny group. Like it's just a really, really funny group of creators. And we even integrated that into this project. And I don't know how we made it happen, but we did, you know. And that's another great sign of the fact that I think, you know, we kind of carve our own path as we go along, right, with every decision we make. And this is another one of those examples of it. Is Jack back there just really going ape shit at him?
That's my dog's fault.
Can you hear him?
It's a wolf howling.
That's a wolf howling, yeah.
My dog just barked, and your dog heard it through.
Heard another dog.
Yeah, you got a dog over there that can hear this right now. The funny thing is, our dog doesn't even know what he's barking at. Like
No.
he's special. He's our special little boy. Eats his own poop. Barks
Hell
into
yeah.
the night at anything.
Yeah.
So we've been talking extensively about the Kickstarter process, and obviously you're now making a corny book, and obviously I think that's great, and I love when people realize the customer is right first and foremost, because that's what this sounds like perfectly, and I think that's a brilliant idea, knowing that you guys can make fun of your book as well. I think it's really shows that you're willing to listen to your audience on what they want and what they're interested in and how they're viewing things. Because I think that that's super important too, especially with the indies and everything that's going on. And we're going to talk about that in 1 second, but I do want to talk about a bunch of stuff really quickly. Obviously, there's t-shirts that are exclusive to the Kickstarter. You can get prints of the covers. You could have a wanted poster of you done. And I think that's going to be in the back of the book for those who want to sort of get drawn in and be part of the book to some degree. I think you could also somewhat be in the book as well in another capacity. And then obviously there's the John Royal variant as well, which is cool because John Royal's done everything. And he's just one of those guys that people know from Marvel. I think he's done stuff for DC and IDW, I want to say as well. And the whole thing, he's sort of big. So obviously there's a lot of stuff that people can pick up as far as rewards. And there's something for everybody, whether you're going from digital all the way to just clean covers, to nude covers, to John Royal's cover, t-shirts, and a bunch of other stuff. I'm pretty sure I'm missing some stuff.
Just, you know, some stretch goals that we've had in place, and no, that's pretty much it. I mean, I think this is the first campaign where we're really just focused on prints, you know, covers and prints.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's been the focus, you know, not a lot of gimmicky, because, you know, with a Western, you know, we talked early on about all kinds of different rewards that would be like physical goods and stuff. And I think this time, I think we wanted to experiment by making the campaign more simplistic.
Mm-hmm.
I've done campaigns before where I've just, you know, I come up with just wild, wacky stuff that people get it, but it's just a lot of physical goods outside of just the art. So we kind of scaled back for this one. It'll help our costs. It'll keep our costs low, you know, and I think that was another point of this. This is an expensive book to make. because of the artists that we've had involved, the team that we've had involved, and for the only reason but to make sure that the book is high quality. So, we wanted to make sure that rewards wouldn't really cost us a lot, because shipping will, printing and shipping will.
So to even jump off of that, because obviously one of the things that I think though that does benefit you is that obviously cons are shut down. They were shut down for all of 2020 since March, and it's looking like it's going to be similar to that as well. Hate to be the bearer of bad news here, but obviously COVID has done a lot of damage to that entire scene, and I think it's driven a lot of people onto Kickstarter that weren't there. Obviously, Keanu Reeves, Boom Studios has done a lot of help with that to some degree as far as driving traffic, Scott Snyder and a bunch of big names. But obviously, people also have less money and they have more money at the same time. It's the weirdest thing in the world where, it's tricky because people want to spend money and people do have money, other people don't. And so I think that's helped and driven stuff. So how do all three of you feel about how Kickstarter has played out and this book being expensive, but also people starving for content due to lack of cons and conventions happening and even not paying for hotels or travel or any of that? So I'm just curious how you guys all view that, because it's very interesting because there's a lot of stuff going on with that, and there is a divide on what's happening. And also there is more competition as far as Kickstarter hitting due to everybody being on.
It's true. What do you think, Scott?
For me, it's hard because I've never actually sold any of my books at a con except for when I did panels. And it was funny because actually in 2019, I'm like, 2020 is going to be my year. I'm going to start doing cons because I got Everett Forge issue 3 ready to go, and then COVID hit, so that kind of put a damper on that whole thing. So I've never actually experienced that. All of my sales I've done through just guerrilla marketing on Facebook and Instagram, Twitter, etc. So I don't know that world so well. I mean, I know it from the outside looking in and buying books from cons, but so for me, I haven't been affected by it that much. Kickstarters and social media have been my main sources of income with the book.
So to even go off of that, do you feel that social media and Kickstarter and Facebook and Twitter and Instagram have been more competitive for you at the moment? Or do you feel that it's been the same, or do you feel that it's even been less competitive? Because it's complicated now that everybody's on it, but everybody's also not on it. It's a weird time collectively.
Yeah, all around, yeah, it's a totally weird time. And I do see there's definitely the more competition. I think the indie market's already becoming saturated before COVID hit. So now with COVID and everyone kind of pilgriming or making their way to that, it is definitely, it's difficult. I haven't ran a Kickstarter since, 2019. So I don't know how bad it truly is in the fields. So Mike can answer that better, but definitely on Facebook and Instagram and everything, there's a lot of competition out there.
I haven't done a con yet, and I know, Scott, you've done conventions before though, right? Because you would do stuff like you went to like steampunk conventions and things like that, right?
Yeah, I never had a booth to sell my comics. I just would sell them at the panels that I hosted. But
yeah. So that's already more than what I've done, and
I've booth babed.
She's been a booth babe.
Nice.
Yeah.
So I have no experience. I wanted to. I was looking forward to it this past year. The first time I talked with you, Andrew, it was about that. 2019 was going to be the year I'd save money back just to build a really big eventful booth. And I was looking at models and people to have at the booth. And then I just saved money back for all that. And then 2019 happened, and 2020 happened. And then 2021's shaping up to be about the same. I think,
yeah,
it's money's being lost definitely more than it's gained. I think, you brought up Keanu Reeves partnering with Boom, wasn't it? He was with Boom in that book. Yeah. So there's no sacred ground. Like there's nothing that's ever going to fully belong to the indie community. Because what happens is the indie community comes up with the ideas and it gets traction. And then big publishers see that. And then that's all they need to see, right? The proof's there. And so they do it too. And so, you know, they can go through Kickstarter and do crowdsourcing. And that might feel like it makes it more competitive for indie creators. Like the money's not going to be there for them the same way because maybe money's going towards Scott Snyder, who's running a Kickstarter, or, you know, Keanu Reeves, who's making a comic, you know. But I mean, it's just like anything else. I mean, you can't be upset about that because, you know, people have the option to spend $5 on your book from you, who's an untested, unfamiliar source, or they could spend $5 on something that they know what they're going to get in terms of quality. They have a built-in expectation, and it is exactly, it's going to meet that expectation. So it's always a risk to invest in something that's unfamiliar. And so we're always going to be at a disadvantage there, you know. And if big publishers come onto the Kickstarter platform, well, it got there because the indie community tapped into something. So I think we just need to keep considering what our next avenue would be if that one gets crowded or overcrowded, you know. But I don't think we're there. I mean, I think the indie community is probably stronger because of Kickstarter, and just because there's a presence of other creators and publishers on there now, I don't know if that's really making us not find an audience. I think it's the whole reason we found an audience is because of Kickstarter. So I don't know. I don't really have a good clear answer on that one.
I also think Kickstarter has become very much a social tool for a lot of people. It provides a lot of data now. You know, 5 years ago, Kickstarter did not provide data the way it provides now, where you know your age group, you know your demographic, you know the part of the country people are ordering from. I mean, if you're shipping it yourself, you definitely know the part of the country that you know you're shipping to, and you can get an idea, as you stated during this interview already, Mike, that like you have an idea of who's ordering and what demographic is ordering certain covers, and so obviously that is very useful. And I think that big names coming in, I've said this before, is that they have a right to do it, but it is a double-edged sword, and we are opening up Pandora's box. And we don't know what that's going to look like in the next 2 to 3 years. It could be the greatest thing. It could be the worst thing. And we don't know in the indie community. And I am not an indie comic creator. I just happen to have interviewed a lot of people in this sector. And if you can't see the writing on the wall, then, you know, that's what it is. I mean, it's pretty blatantly clear. But having gone off of that, and obviously I know that all of you haven't done cons as far as selling books. Where do you even think cons are going? Because obviously 2021 is not looking like it's not going to happen. And obviously the vaccination is getting rolled out, but it's a slow process. Also, I think people aren't going to be saying, hey, let's go to 100,000 person con so quickly. I know that I'm not interested in going through a 100,000 person con or a 20,000 person con. You know, even if the vaccination is 100% effective and COVID is long behind us in the middle of June, I'm not so gun-ho on coming back to the con scene so quickly, not to mention the economic effects and other things. So I'm curious how all three of you feel about that, because it is tricky and it's very unknown, but there's certain parameters, I would say, that sort of give me an indication. I don't know if you agree or disagree or what your feel is on it, because you guys are more on the inside than I am.
You would have to, if when it comes back, you have to fundamentally restructure the whole way it operates. I mean, if you've been to a con, you know it's shoulder to shoulder, squeeze and pat, especially like in Artist Alley. You know, if you you're breathing in everyone's stank at that point. So I don't know how. I would hate to have to be a con organizer and try to figure that out, because that's going to be a nightmare. I mean, spacing booths, you're going to have less booths to sell spots to. I don't know if you restrict how many people can go in at one time. It's going to be a difficult challenge for a con.
I don't even know how you even enforce people wearing masks. I don't know how you enforce,
honestly,
people
no.
in
what they do now.
You know?
Yeah.
There's like, oh, it's
It's really nice if you did this, please.
Yeah. Everyone come as your favorite Mortal Kombat character with your mask.
Well, that would be,
Yeah.
I'd be all for it.
And Mortal Kombat Con will do, you know, something
Yeah,
else.
that one will do well.
They'll all go as like
Also, all outdoors.
Do you notice how much more attractive people got too because of that? I mean, that's. Sorry, I'm being a dick now, but you know, it's just.
Perfect time to get braces.
Yeah, right. You
Yeah.
know, so like, you know, I live in the South, so if you can cover up someone's mouth, I mean, I'm gonna stop. 'Cause, I think social distancing and things like that, I think that's something that'll go away when the vaccination has hit a point where it's, you know, we're going to eventually have to just treat that like the common flu shot. You know what I mean? Eventually we're going to be like, hey, this is going to be something that you're going to need.
Thing,
yeah, you know, right. There'll be
so.
mutations of it, just like there are in the flu virus, right? Like every year we see some sort of alteration.
They weaken.
And I'm not trying to compare COVID to the flu, you know, because I'll get a lot of rocks thrown at me just for that. But what I'm saying is how we treat something that's unique or foreign to us, and we're still trying to understand. I think as time goes on, everybody gets comfortable and gets back in the water. And maybe Jaws is not a good analogy for this either, because I might be sounding like the mayor of Amity.
Everything's
so, but everything's completely fine. Just a couple kids have been slaughtered. It's I think we'll get to a point where it'll be, you know, common acceptance again to just, we're not always gonna have to wear masks. I believe. I really think we'll get to a point where we'll all be comfortable again, and there's gonna be people that will never be comfortable and will always wear a mask, and those people will probably just you know, it'll be just a part of, you know, where we're just gonna, you know, have a way of life there where we're always going to have to be mindful of that and accommodate that for the people that.
There are countries that already do.
Yeah.
I mean, I think humans are so adaptable just over time that eventually we kind of find ways that things need to change. So if this is something that is an ongoing thing, then we adapt, and maybe we progress beyond something that maybe will be a better version, hopefully, you know. So I think the ways that things can adapt can drive some positive changes, maybe in how people kind of do these different things. It's like, even you think about going Christmas shopping, if you're trying to go out to the stores and just having that limited number, I know it was probably less crazy for retail workers that could actually, actually do their job person to person. There are those things that it's changed already in that kind of realm. So you know, ideally and hopefully even just in the con realm, you know, there will be some positive changes that maybe make things more accessible to people too. You know, if there's a huge line for someone, maybe they can adjust how they're doing that and stuff. So I think there might be some positives and some good things that we change because of it, and can maybe be more productive and efficient and things like that too.
I think there'll be more cons too. Like that was like, as soon as when you're talking about that, like if there's less artists, like if you're spaced out more, let's say, you know, space is a big, you know, a concern. We're just going to need to have more of them in closer locations. Like, you know, I think that's another thing too, rather than there be these meccas, for lack of a better word right now, but these epicenters for cons, we see that this is happening more, you know, within states, and there's different pockets in each state where they have conventions where a lot of artists, you know, that maybe couldn't make it to this convention because of spacing, they are now in this one over here, and that's going to be with another group of artists with the same scenario. So I kind of feel like less vendors in a building means that there needs to be more buildings. So I don't think the artists are going to go away. I don't think the vendors are going to go away, and the fans certainly aren't going to go away. They're just going to have to be more outlets, you know, and I think that might actually be a good thing, because you know, just listening to Alice there, I think that might be a byproduct of it, is that we just have more conventions, but smaller scale.
I also think that customer service is going to have to go up as well. Where I think that's going to be the secret sauce, where prices are going to have to increase, but I think with those price increases, there's going to be better customer service, and there's going to be more access to what you want. Yeah. So now, instead of having to, you're going to be able to get what you want faster, more efficiently, or you're going to be able to get something super special at a convention now. Meaning that, for instance, and I don't know if you have ever thought about this, but obviously different people have con exclusives. A bunch of different companies have it. And I think that's what's going to start happening more as well, where that type of exclusivity where, look, legitimately, this is the only place you can get it. And here and here and here in these 4 cons there's 100 of them. And now, this is the only place you can get it type of thing. And I think more customer service, more specialty is going to persist. And I also think that, I think more spacing, and I also think more digital stuff is just going to start popping up. And right now, the digital side of things isn't working. Wizard World isn't working. GalaxyCon is doing okay. And then there's like Color World is doing okay, but they're not killing it. But I think that eventually some company is going to figure out how to do it the right way. And I think that's also going to be replacing it extensively. And I don't think we're there yet, because I think a lot of experimentation is happening. But I think that eventually we're going to get there too, because I don't think this is going away. I don't think interviewing is going away, because this is definitely a byproduct. What we're doing right now, and any interview right now in the middle of COVID, is a byproduct. Because legitimately last April, there was, I would say, 80% less people doing what I'm doing right now. And now there's everybody and their uncle's doing this. And it's crazy. And so obviously, I think it's clear on the Kickstarter side, it's become way more competitive, and podcasting has probably grown by 500 to about 1,000% in the last year or so, because everybody's doing this. So it's clear to me where things are going, and I don't think the digital stuff is ever going to leave, because I can reach more customers for $20 than I could ever reach at a con, which is insane on Facebook right now.
Yeah, so I think that's where. I think when we get comfortable with a method or a platform, that's when you should switch it up, because if it's easy for you, like you just said, everyone else will jump on and it'll become easy for them too. And then suddenly, it's like it's oversaturated. You got like that pool where everybody's in the pool. Peeing. Which I'm into. So, but,
we learn things about you, Mike, every time.
So I think you could probably make the physical experience, finding a way to elevate it to where that's the only, I think people, even in this environment, I think something that's probably affected a lot of us. I think it's affected my mental health, but just not being able to be out drinking with friends occasionally. And that's not something that I normally do, but just, knowing that I can do that and it'd be comfortable, and knowing that I can hug a bud, just when I want to.
Things to say no to.
I like bud hugs. Yeah, I like being able to say no thanks. I'll see you guys on the next one or whatever. But I want to hug Scott. Like, I see Scott right now, and I want to be face to face with this guy and hug him right in front of Alice. Front hug him, like really full body touching.
Beard to beard, man.
Chest touching.
What's the cup your ass?
At each other. Like, I want a close
together
connection with this guy. Like, I want to have that, and there's a bunch of friends that I've made through the community that I don't really think about them as just like indie comic friends. Like, I don't really say that really anymore. Like, when I'm talking about Scott, when I talk about Alex, they call, like, Alex calls me. Alex is another creator that I'm just that worked with me on Midnight Highway. He calls me just out of the blue, just talking, shoot the shit and stuff. Like, we formed friendships through all this, and I think the convention experience, I think, is something that we all want to get back to. If not even just to meet like any potential fans or consumers and customers, but just to hang out with friends and to see friends and make new friends and stuff. I think so. Like, when you think about the customer experience side of that, is you're going to have to treat them like friends. I mean, you're going to have to make them want to be with you in person and hang out with you and shake their hand. I mean, I look forward to that a lot. You know, somebody buys something that we made, like I want to look them in their eye and shake their hand and get their first name. And while they make laps around the con, I'm going to like yell out their name every time and point at them and wink at them a little bit.
And I think that's something.
Yeah.
And I think that's something that cons are going to have to figure out how to do, in which I think even going beyond just the vendors and all that, I think a convention itself is almost going to have to start treating people like friends and not as a commodity. Because I think that's another good thing that's going to come out on the con side is that, you know, fans aren't commodities anymore. You know, because now, you know what it is, I don't think I'm in the minority on what I said about not jumping right back into the pool. I get that people are hungry for it. But, you know, I think the same thing, obviously I'm a big wrestling fan. I think WWE, AEW, the indies on wrestling are have the exact same problem where people like content and they're starving for it. But I don't know how many people are jumping right back into the pool first second they get. And I think that there's going to have to be a change in the way business is done. And I think, you know, whoever figures out what that change is going to be and capitalizes on it, whether you're an indie creator or you're a celebrity or you're like me, who I'm a panelist and I host a lot of panels at cons, you know, whoever figures that out first is going to kill it and is going to get the most fans when all this stuff starts starting to come back to normal. And so I think it's going to be just such an interesting venue. But obviously I can't top Mike wanting to pee in the pool, and that's what he's into. So I don't know if anybody has any other comments on that.
Oh, I'm sure they have a lot to say.
But having said all that, and I really can't top any more questions I have, and I'm sure I missed a bunch of stuff, and so I'm going to give everybody an opportunity to self-promote. Obviously, the Kickstarter is out. You're fully funded, so the book's happening, and now it's just a matter of reaching stretch goals. And if you want the book, you know, obviously you can pick it up. Again, digitally, you get a bunch of physical stuff. You can pick whatever cover you want. Everything is pretty reasonably priced, all things considering. So obviously, check out the Kickstarter for starters. So where can people find the Kickstarter?
Yep. I probably want to take a pause for a second because we talked about Dead End Moon a ton. There are other Kickstarters also going on right now that I think people should really check out. I'm going to start with a few that I know that I've backed and have supported.
I'm going to drop one because I want to drop one that you might drop. One last job.
Yes.
Go back.
Aaron Down is probably watching right now and making sure that we do it. So, those guys over at Catalyst Comics, they're a nice group of guys. Both Matt and Aaron, really good dudes, have a lot of hustle right now. They're putting a lot of creativity behind their projects. I think they have a lot of love for the community. They're just really nice guys. I think that they've made a really cool book here. Good talented artists on it. It's a black and white book. Kind of if you enjoy the Bourne Identity or the Bourne series, James Bond, things like that.
If you're a Polar fan, this is a good book for you. Yeah,
there you go. So one last job, The Illusion Witch by Ruben Romero.
He was on.
He's a bud of yours. Yeah, I know. So you got to check out.
Four-time club, Ruben.
Oh, okay.
I'm the fifth one. We're getting shirts.
This is number 2 for me. So, geez. The Illusion Witch. You guys should really check that out. I think it's a very colorful looking book, hyper fantasy, but at the same time a very human story. Ruben kind of gave me just a general outline of the way the story goes. And I think that people would be pleasantly surprised by the veil of fantasy and what's really going on. So it's a pleasantly well-written book.
I'll sell something about that as well because I could sell it. So there's an Easter egg in the first issue, and the first 5 people who spot that are going to get a really cool thing from Don't Forget a Towel, which is also Casey Balker's book imprint. He's got a bunch of stuff cool as well. Pursuit of Plastic is a really cool book. But I'm not too sure when that's coming back for issue 2, but it's a super fun toy book. But obviously that's involved. So if that's not a good enough incentive for you, I don't know what the Easter egg is. I'm competing letting everybody know. He didn't let me know, and he said I could compete. So I'm absolutely competitive, and I promise you, I will find it before everybody else finds it. You can call me partisan. Yes, that's a Ready Player One reference.
It's a really bold statement, man. I take you up on your challenge.
I'll have all my students.
Keep in mind, like I'm like I talk to Ruben every day. I'm like, hey, show me any kind of new art. I could probably see this book before it's went to print. All right, so I'm gonna be digging, man. I'm competitive. I'm also dirty. So, and then and listen, like Scott Wilkes' book, Legend of Everett Forge.
Wilke.
Yeah, Wilke. I said it. I said Wilke, didn't I? I do it all the time. I don't know. I call him shithead more than Scott and stuff. So like it doesn't matter what his real name is. So, Scott's book. It's one of the first indie books that I read that I was like, wow, I felt humbled and I was like, God, I gotta get better at writing. And because I was like, man, I just wanted to be okay at writing and get through this. You had to be good, And Scott's book, Legend of Everett Forge. I don't know if he promotes himself enough. I really don't think. That's why I'm gonna pimp him out. But Scott, do you even have this book available to sell to people? Or do you have copies right now that people can buy?
We do. About Time Comics.
All right, go to abouttimecomics. Is it .com? Is it
Yeah.
About Time Comics?
I think so. Yeah. Yep.
You got to read this book. Steampunk Western. If you want to generalize it with a genre, it's just really great art and a great story. Really great dialogue. That's the thing that drew me to Scott, was he just does a great job with dialogue. It's a great series. You can see the posters behind them on the wall. So I got to drop that one too. That's the whole reason why, I kept making comics, was because of inspirations like this. So I think people need to read this book.
Thank you. It means a lot.
And now where can people find this Kickstarter? Since we all took a pause and promoted everybody else's stuff, obviously I want to direct people to your Kickstarter as well. That's the point of this. I mean, seriously.
Dead End Moon. Just type it in. Just literally go to Kickstarter, search Dead End Moon. It will be the first thing that pops up. And the project image is black with just the focus on the main character, so it'll stick out. Purple text, purple logo. That's great thing about titles for books, right, is you try to make sure you have one that sticks out, that's unique, that can draw attention to people. I hope I did that with that one. So
for sure.
And then even going beyond, I'm going to let Scott promote something in a second, and Alice, you could also promote something. But obviously, where can people follow you, Mike, on social media? Follow, obviously, Black Jackets is out there as well, and a variety of other things, just to keep up to date, because you got a bunch of projects coming down the pike.
Mm-hmm. We all do. And Facebook. I'm 37 years old. I haven't jumped on Twitter. I'm like, I can't quite understand the platform well enough to make it effective. Instagram, I'm on there too, but I find that I can routinely communicate and connect with people through Facebook the best. And so just, Mike Teener, just look me up on Facebook, and you can look up Alice as well. She's got two. Professional.
Yeah, my professional one.
Which is her middle name.
Yeah,
Alice Elaine. Alice Elaine Yurick, as opposed to just Alice Yurick. So, but yeah, that's the best way to find me, Facebook. And I respond to every message. I talk to everybody. If you comment on something, if you send me a message, I'll respond to you. As weird as you may be, you will get it.
Do it.
You will get a response from me. I will ignore Alice. Playing on Facebook all day.
And then what about you, Scott? What do you have to promote as far as what's going on with your work, as well as where can people find you, and where can people find Dead End Moon and all that stuff like Kickstarter?
Yeah. Legend of Everett Forge. We have issue 3 out, abouttimecomics.com. Otherwise, you can hit me up on Facebook, Instagram. I'm Scott Wilke 24 on Instagram. What else? I'm working on a book with Lee Giles from About Time Comics called Red Scare. It's a zombie apocalyptic, black and white, Sin City-ish, very cool, cool look and work. And what else do I got? Undercity Tales through Mike, so you should check that one out. And I think you can get that through the Kickstarter, right? The Undercity copy.
An add-on.
Yeah, you can get
As an
it as
add-on?
an add-on for Dead End Moon. Basically, just the whole Bad Bug library is on there.
So yeah,
That's just my placeholder publishing name right now.
No, I love it. But yeah, as Mike shouted me out, definitely check out all of Mike's. I have Mike's entire catalog, so add those on to your Dead End Moon, because there's not a single weak story in there. And Black Jackets, I've told him this from the start that I see that being a Netflix series, like Umbrella Academy. So now we have it on film that I've said that. So yeah, that's all for me, guys.
So I don't know if Alice, you have anything you would like to promote.
Not really. I don't know.
She's
I don't know. I don't know what I do. Other people tell me what I do. I mean, I guess I have my Facebooks. I have my Instagram, Corduroy Croissant, spelled like the coin corduroy.
You'll never find her.
You won't.
Pick two.
I forget to post stuff on there anyway.
Two words that no one knows how to spell correctly.
Yeah.
I'm still trying to find her.
But I mean, mostly I guess I've just been working on this, and then artwork that I put into art gallery exhibitions and stuff. So
she's working on another book. She's trying to be.
I don't know how much I'm supposed to say and not say.
Okay, don't say anything.
Because I don't feel like I
seem more interesting.
Yeah.
By not saying anything, right? So
there you go.
There's more to
female leads.
More female leads. Not
Nice.
not of the nature that you're thinking either, right? So, but it's going to be fun. It's going to be really, I think it's going to be something that we really haven't seen. I think one thing that we always try to set out to do is to make something that we don't think's out there. So, so really strong female leads, and a pretty interesting premise. And she's working on that right now. We'll probably talk about that more as we get about halfway point in the year.
Yeah.
Nice.
Or halfway point in actually doing it.
Yeah, that's it. It's concept phase, which means just talking about it.
So on that note, we're going to wrap up, but I have been saying it with every single interview, and this is over 100 at this point, and I'm sure people are getting sick of me saying it, but you have to support indie. Because if you like what you see, no matter who it's from, and in particular on the indie scene, you need to support it. And ideally, you need to support it economically, because it's great to tweet something at all, and I'm all for that. And I'm a big proponent of following people on social media, like in their Facebook pages, friending them if they're cool with that, checking out their Instagram, tweeting at them, sharing it. That's all great. But at this stage in the game, if you can afford it, you have extra money lying around, I get it. COVID's tough. People are struggling. Please take care of your family, your dog. Make sure your house's mortgage is being paid, your rent's being paid, 4 walls are around, electricity's on, internet's on. Please take care of yourself first. But if you have extra money, please consider definitely backing this project and other projects. Even if it's a digital reward and it's $5-10, it goes a long way, and it does make a big difference. And it is super important. And if you can, as I stated before, you definitely need to be backing social media stuff and following people on social media, checking out their website, checking out what they're doing, sharing it on your social media, because that goes such a long way as well. And at this point, there's no excuse anymore. And if you can't do one, you should do the other, but you should hopefully do both, because they are super important. And so on that note, I'm going to give both Scott and Mike and Alice the final word. So anything else you'd like to say, the floor is yours.
I mean, I'm just thankful for this opportunity to get to kind of be here and do this experience for my first time, kind of interview stuff and all that. So I've had a really nice time, and so I appreciate the invitation.
Yeah, thanks again. I think this is my first podcast, so awesome. Thank you. And again,
and before Mike speaks, keep it professional, please.
Thank you, Andrew.
Well said.
And on that note, it's a wrap.